Hey, hey. All right, everybody. So a lot of you were here last year, right? You saw the little movie that we produced. So we've been talking about Smoke for the last couple of years. We've been talking about Smoke 2013 since last year. We finally launched Smoke 2013 in December, and we had several versions released since then. We were showing at the booth and outside here in the vendor area our extension edition of 2013. So I do recommend that you guys all go and see the Ken LaRue experience. But tonight we're not going to do a Smoke demo, because we actually have someone who's been using Smoke for the last 6 months, 8 months?
6 months.
So you guys all know Alexis, right? So you know him from his Resolve Antics. How many of you have read the Color Corrector Handbook? A lot of you. So Alexis is working on the second edition of this.
I am. It's 150 more pages for you to read.
And Alexis has been lovingly working with Smoke for the past several months, working on a training manual that we'll get to later. But in the process, he created this beautiful film that I'm really proud to let him talk about tonight, and how Smoke helped him tell the story. So Smoke is a storytelling tool, and you'll find out just how much. Take it away.
All right. Well, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I usually come up here and I drive software and I show you how to do things. But when I'm not working in post-production, I am a director, and I'm a writer-director. And one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was how I was able to use this tool, Smoke, to tell a story. And not talk about the technology so much as talk about how this application has allowed me to do a very visual effects intensive project. It's a little project, but I was able to do some incredibly impressive effects with a bunch of really great folks helping me out using Smoke. And here's a trailer.
Hey, honey. Happy anniversary again.
I love you.
I love you.
No!
People are starting to ask about you.
I'm almost done.
With what? What's the big mystery project?
It's personal.
It's bad enough that your program is based on a theory that nobody cares about.
So it's still a work in progress. We're about 12 days away from finishing it, but that gives you a taste of what the project is about. So the story is about a professor of physics who's kidnapped by her alternate from another dimension. And as you can tell right there, we've got a lot of effects. I've got actor duplication, I've got green screen sets, I've got big crazy machines of physics that I'm green screening in. And for all of these reasons, I really thought that Smoke would be a good tool to use, because it's an extremely capable editor, and it has really powerful VFX. And in fact, I have a background with Shake, and I was really sad when Shake was discontinued. And I've been looking for another node-based environment, but I wanted something a little more multi-purpose than Nuke. And Smoke, to me, seemed like a good tool for this job. It's a very visually oriented story. Now, visual effects gets a bad rap, I think, because a lot of folks who maybe don't want to put a lot of time in the story think that they can impress an audience with a lot of flashy stuff. But for me, even though I'm a writer, I don't like to write more dialogue than I need, and this is one of the first pages in the story, and it's one of my favorite pages because it's only got 3 lines of dialogue, and one of them is ow. So I really wanted the visual effects to tell the story, and because I wanted that, I knew I was going to have to do visual effects along with the editing that I was doing. Now, a little bit of making of, so you can see the elements that went into the edit. The machine was a really big part, that big moving machine in Nina's lab. And I'm a low-budget filmmaker, so I don't want to write something on the page that I'm not going to be able to afford to do later on. So before I decided what the machine was going to be, I worked to find what the location would be. This is my wife, Kaylin Rashke, who is an excellent art director and wardrobe stylist and also an actress herself. And she's also the reason why most of my films look as good as they do, frankly. And she's sitting in the back row, so please give her a hand. If you like how that looked, a lot of that was her. So, as I said, she's an actress, and she rehearsed a play last year, and the rehearsal space she used was still available. And it was available on the cheap. We looked at bigger stages. For basically a quarter of a day on a big stage, we were able to get these 2 locations in band rehearsal spaces for a month and a half to do our build-in, do the shoot, and then build out. So it was really ideal, but it meant that I needed to use a green screen to join the 2 locations when the dimensional doorway opened up. Again, I knew I was going to need to have a lot of effects while I was editing that offline. So once I knew what the location was going to be, I sat down with the DP, Bo Hakala, and we sketched out what kind of coverage I wanted to do, how it would be good to handle that scene, drew a thumbnail of a good way to arrange the lab, and I handed that off to Ryan Beckwith, who is a storyboard artist in New York that I work with quite a bit. He also does concept art. He did a bunch of different thumbnails. This was the one that floated to the top for me. I liked how it looked like a random assemblage of pieces of surplus equipment that a physics professor might get. And with that general design in mind, I sat down and drew out a floor plan so I could do more detailed assessments of the coverage I wanted to do for each scene. I knew I was going to have to be very organized if everything was going to fit together later on in effects. So with this general layout done, Kaylin was able to pull her crew together and start building in the practical part of the set. And as a director, even though I do tons and tons of work in post all of the time, I don't personally like it when an actor is purely surrounded by green screen. I wanted to have switches that Nina could flick. I wanted to have things that she would be interacting with, in addition to all the craziness I couldn't afford to build. So this, to me, is a perfect scenario where I've got half of a real set and then half a green screen set extension. After the shoot, I took some stills, sent them back to Ryan. He did a more final rendering of what the machine was supposed to look like, and that rendering was handed off to BJ West, who's a CG artist and animator in the Bay Area near San Francisco, and he went ahead and built me this gorgeous model, fully animatable, fully articulated, that I was able to work into the scenes. So pre-visualization was a really big part of the project, and again, I wanted to make sure when I fed Smoke, I fed it the right stuff. So I took that floor plan that I created in a program called SketchUp, which is there's a free version of that app from Google, I believe. And one of the cool things about SketchUp is there's all kinds of free models you can download, so I was able to populate the room with very little effort. I precisely matched the measurements of the real set. As you can see, here's challenge number 1. I've got 2 different sets, 2 completely different locations, but when that doorway is open, they're joined. So I have to shoot both of them with the other set in mind. And on top of that, I've got an actor, Dawn Krasnowski, who was absolutely fantastic to work with, and her double, Emily Muskin. And so for each set, I had 2 wardrobe and makeup changes. And those actually took longer than the camera setups. So basically, I had 4 combinations of coverage that I had to keep track of. And I knew if I didn't prepare, I was going to be doomed. So I took that 3D model I created and actually did full 3D pre-visualization, just like the big films. And I literally practiced directing the movie in my home office. And I actually went through the full film 3 times, refining the boards until I got it to be just what I wanted. So later on, when we moved into production, I was prepared for this. This was a 3-day shoot. Day 1 was the lab, day 2 was the office, and day 3 was everything else, driving scenes, a living room visit scene. Time was tight, I needed to be organized, and I have to give huge thanks to Molly Katagiri, who's my assistant director, who took my big stack of storyboards and turned it into a schedule that had us leaving no later than midnight every night. And for an independent film with a low budget, that's pretty good. So Molly's idea was to tape all the storyboards on the wall outside of our set so we could constantly refer to them, and boy, did we. And on top of that bout of organization, Bo and I had to keep track of all the camera angles, measure relentlessly every height, every tilt, every location, because the cameras in each shot and reverse shot in the 2 rooms had to line up perfectly. So it was a huge logistical exercise. And as you can see, the footage we ended up shooting pretty well matched the planning that I had done. So I had a very nice series of plates put together, ready to work with. A few nerdy details. We shot with a Red 1 MX camera, and we shot with super speed primes. Basically, I saved money on the camera body so I could get better glass. This was Bo's idea. And I've color corrected enough project shot with Red 1 MX material to know that it was good data, it would hold up well in post, it would do everything I needed it to do. And I'd rather have good lenses over the long haul than a better camera myself. We also shot timecode synchronized audio, and I have to really thank Tom Colvin. I did hire a professional audio recordist. And he was great. He was absolutely great. And I have to give him credit because we actually didn't loop a single line of dialogue in the whole thing. And these were not quiet locations. In fact, I believe our audio guy used a few isotope plugins, I think. But yeah, he did great work. So when we moved into post-production, I ended up with a set of R3D media files and broadcast wave files, which I turned into Redlog film-encoded ProRes 4x4 dailies. Now, one of the great things about Smoke is on my main machine, it was able to edit very capably using the ProRes 4x4 media, and I figured, well, why do a reconform if I don't have to? I'll just edit with my full quality media and then feed shots to all of the compositing artists. So the way this ended up working out is Smoke was absolutely at the center of post-production for me. All the editing, all the compositing done in Smoke. I used DaVinci Resolve to create the dailies. I did timecode sync of the timecode synchronized audio, spit out the ProRes. Brian Olson at Splice here created all of the visual elements that were used to create those heads-up displays using Adobe Illustrator and Adobe After Effects, exported ProRes media, incorporated into Smoke. And then BJ West used another very capable Autodesk product, 3D Studio Max, and exported OpenEXR sequences of all the models, which were then composited inside of Smoke. So I had a lot of applications feeding Smoke, and then Smoke was putting it all together for me. And I want to show you how this worked. So the first shot I'm going to break down for you is one of those heads-up display shots. The final shots were done by Aaron Vasquez, a compositing artist in New York, really great guy. And what we started out with is this. This is the raw clip. And this is actually ProRes 4x4. I just slammed the clip into Keynote. It can play it. Hooray. So what I did to make sure that her gestures were consistent from angle of coverage to angle of coverage is we put tape markers on the wall that she was looking at. So she would always be pointing at the right thing and looking at the right thing as we put things together later on. So when I'm editing an offline, usually I do something like this when I've got an effect shot. I'll just stick an inset. I know it's supposed to be a floating window, but I don't want to waste a ton of time on it. So picture in picture, I can line up the performances, get the ranges of media I want. Maybe I'll put VFX here down in the corner so people know that this isn't really how it's supposed to look. And that's good for me as an editor, but a problem I constantly have is I like to get early feedback on cuts from my inner circle of reviewers. And a lot of the times people look at something like this and they go, well, you know, I don't really see the way it's supposed to look. I can't really imagine it. even though I'm in the film industry and maybe I should be able to. And, you know, it's just distracting. It's distracting, and I can't give you feedback because it's just distracting, and that sucks for me. So what I'm able to do in Smoke is to create something like this. So I take the shots, and I use the fact that Smoke is a true 3D environment and also has some good motion tracking right from the timeline to actually float in my alternate floating window and put together a shot that no one's going to be distracted by. It looks kind of like it's suggestive of what the final shot's supposed to be like. And on top of making the reviewers happy, I have a good set of timings and direction information for the compositing artist later on. So Brian Olson put together all of these individual graphics pieces. Basically, he created a toolkit that I could use, or that the compositing artists could use, to build all of the HUDs throughout the movie. And this is what Aaron was able to put together with all of those elements.
Hey, honey. Happy anniversary again. I called Arturo's. I told you they would already have our reservations booked. You owe me that martini. I love you.
You can't believe how happy I was when I saw the first version of this emailed from Aaron. It was just great. So this is another one of my favorite effects. This is the dimensional doorway effect, and this is really important because it comes at two key points of the story. Brian Mulligan in Indiana put this together, did a really great job, and this is an even better example of what I'm talking about, of how Smoke was able to help me out. So these are the raw shots that we took in the field, and as the producer-director, I take full blame for underlighting that shadowy green screen because I'm the one who said, oh, it looks good, moving on, knowing full well I'd be one of the compositors working on it. So nothing like directing your own piece and then compositing it to understand why you need another 5 minutes. We also had these mirror rig shots, which are interesting because of the size of the lab and where the wall was. Obviously, we couldn't put the camera past the wall, but we had to match the position of where the actor would really be if there was a dimensional doorway and a room beyond that wall. So it was Bo Hackela's idea to get a big, huge mirror and do trigonometry to figure out how to position the camera to get those matching angles. And then we got to get poor Dawn to do her eye lines in reverse, which was really mind-bending, but she did it. The very first composite I did, this was literally the first thing I ever did with Smoke, because I learned it for this project, was to put this together because I was dying to find out if things were going to line up convincingly, because this was either going to work perfectly or it was going to be horrible. And it worked. I was so relieved. One of the cool things about Smoke is you've got the same high-quality keyer in the timeline as you do in Connect Effects, which is a huge node-based, very complicated, but extremely powerful compositing environment. So once you learn it here, you can use it there. But more to the point, right on the timeline, I've got really high-quality keying. And the keyer is very conveniently assembled. It's really a joy to use. So once I had that set up, I wanted to, again, give my video reviewers something better to look at. And more to the point, I wanted to play around with the shot and try and figure out what kind of doorway I wanted. There were all kinds of directions we could go into. So I put this effect together myself. Didn't take that long, and it was a tremendous learning experience. Using the wall, this fake wall is a snapshot we took with Kaylin's camera on the set. It ended up working beautifully. So the reviewers loved looking at it. I was able to hand this off to Brian, who then could see what my timing was, what the position was, roughly what I was going for. We had a 20-minute conversation on the phone, and he was able to go off and give me this. And then Aaron Vasquez went ahead and put a HUD over the top of that. So beautiful effect. I really loved it. Here's the last shot I want to show you. This isn't necessarily a good example of how this affected editing. I'm just showing off because this is one of my favorite shots. We call this the monster shot because it's a really, really long shot. And throughout the movie, I've done enough visual effects to know that 3D camera solves are tough. And as much as it's nice to have a floating camera for every single effect, if I did that, I would have killed my own schedule. So I did a lot of locked camera shots. But I knew that the only way I'd get away with locked shots in this day and age is if I had one really impressive virtual camera move that integrated this fake set extension we were doing in a way that really made people believe this machine was there. Now, this is still a work in progress, but I handed this off to Joel Osis, who's a compositing artist in Australia, has a website, does some really great smoke and flame tutorials if you're interested. And he spent a good, I don't know how long, weeks, working on this resolve. And he pulled something out of his hat that I found incredibly impressive. Handed that camera data off to BJ, who then fit his model into the geometry of the whole room. And this was us lining it up to make sure that everything was working properly before we sent this off to a render farm in Singapore that specializes in 3D Studio Max renders, and they were fantastic to work with. They rendered out a beauty pass, Z-depth pass, and a few lighting passes so we could do some post-production trickery later on. And with all of this in hand, sent it back to Joel Osis, thank God for Dropbox, and he put together this. Again, uncolor corrected, this is very much a work in progress, but I love the track so much, I just wanted to show it off for Joel. Pulls around, and oh my God, there's a machine there!
Hey, Nina.
Hey, Carol, can I swing by your house and pick up that drive?
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, still a lot of work to do on this sequence, but keep in mind, my budget is minuscule, and we're able to do this thanks to Smoke. So once all the work is done, and this is the second to last slide, I promise you, I've already gone through this workflow twice, once for a teaser, which is what I'm going to wrap up with, and once for the trailer that you saw at the very head of the program. Basically, Smoke's still right in the middle and finishing. It's sending AAF to Kelly Piclo at Splice here doing the audio mix using Pro Tools. He's handing me back a stereo wave mixdown. And then I'm my own cheapest colorist. How convenient. So I'm exporting an EDL and ProRes 4x4 out to DaVinci Resolve, doing the grade there, and exporting the video equivalent of a mixdown, a big QuickTime file, back to Smoke. And in Smoke, I'm putting on the final titles and prepping it all for final output. So that's the workflow. It's been very nice, and I can honestly say, having gone from 0 to 60 with Smoke on a very ambitious project, it's been an interesting program to learn, and it's really hit everything I needed it to do. So I found it a very effective environment for this kind of project with a fusion of editorial and effects. So I'd like to leave you with one last look of the film. This is the first fully finished scene. It's the first 2-minute scene of the movie, and I hope you like it.
Hey, honey. Happy anniversary again. I called Arturo's. I told you they would already have our reservations booked. You owe me that martini. I love you.
Carol, what's up?
I wanted to find out if you were okay switching days for cluster access. UCSC's geology department needs some time-critical seismic simulations on Big G.
Sure. When can I get in?
This Thursday?
Sounds great.
Thanks, Nina.
Surprised.
So, not bad for somebody who'd never used Smoke 9 months ago, right? So, Alexis has been writing a great book that's called Smoke Essentials. It will be out in a couple of weeks. It is the greatest way for you guys to fit Smoke in your pipeline. So if you're storytelling and visual creators, we think and we strongly believe that this is a great way for you to learn Smoke and to use Smoke. And also, you know, there's a free 30-day trial. You'll be able to download the book. You'll be able to buy the book. You'll be able to download media from the film and actually recreate some of these effects.
Actual ProRes 4x4 media.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so all the green screens, some HUD elements, and all of that. So all the exercises are built on the book. You can go outside. You can see us at the table, and there is a 20% discount right now on Smoke. I mean, Autodesk rarely makes discounts. It's pretty substantial. Rarely. So 20% off on Smoke. If you're interested, you can come and see us outside. Thank you very much, Alexis.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mike and Dan. See you next year.